Hello, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art forum wasn't enough, and welcome back to another edition of the Ed-ternal Summer. Written media!
Yep, the Eds have had a fair share of written media in their names, from books to comics to the vast world of fanfiction. Let's start with books. Published in 2005, Scholastic made Lots of Laughs and Books of Extreme Excuses. Lots of Laughs was written by Jesse Leon McCann and advertises the book is 3 stories in one.
So it's basically like we're reviewing 3 episodes from the show, except instead of actual footage, we're going to see still shots of the book's pages. Alright, sounds fair enough. This is Lots of Laughs.
So the first story is Sir Ed-a-Lot. It begins with Eddy showing off a car to everyone, and Double D asks, "Whose car is this?" Eddy responds, "Beats me," and immediately we jump into them trying to find Ed.
You gotta love how Season 1 episodes just began with the most random of things and then they jumped into the plot.
The two search Ed's room to find Ed wearing a dress. They proceed to laugh at him.
Ooh, Tumblr is not going to like this story.
Nah, the real reason Ed's dressed like this is because Sarah's forcing him to roleplay that she's his queen, because if Ed doesn't, she'll tell Mom. Ed, terrified of Sarah, says he will, and sadly Double D and Eddy are roped into the mix, much to Eddy's anger. Once Jimmy arrives as a prince, Sarah announces, "Let the games begin!"
Oh, Eds, we are just getting started.
The games begin with Ed back riding, Sarah on Eddy and Jimmy on Ed, and they go for a race. But it seems Ed has more leg power, so Jimmy wins. "You lost, horsey! Bad, 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 bad!" Eddy, rightfully pissed off, says, "This
stinks."
And it results in Eddy being thrown into a cage. Ed lets him out, since Sarah commands that Eddy will now be made the court jester. Eddy doesn't want to do it until Ed mentions that they're being paid.
Remember, kids, if you want something done, just remember that you can have anything you want in the entire world done as long as you have the glorious power of
money.
Eddy proceeds to tell jokes. "Why'd the chicken cross the road?" "To lay an egg, just like you are now!" "I just flew into Peach Creek and boy."
I mean, what's the deal with the cost of jawbreakers? I mean, a quarter? A measly, lousy quarter for a jawbreaker? What's the deal with that?
Eddy tries magic tricks, but Sarah comes back at him with, "You
stink."
Oh, Sarah, come some slack. At least he's better than Carlos Mencia.
But Sarah and Jimmy decide to make a mess in the house, and now the Eds are running every which way but loose to keep the house clean, and it all ends with a vacuum exploding.
But it's okay, Eds, because the cat in the hat who stepped on the mat then came back. Oh, wait, wrong book.
Eddy then declares himself king and cages Sarah.
I don't know about you, but that makes me extremely happy.
But Ed comes up with a better idea. Paint a picture, put it in front of the camera, and let the episode end. Well, that's my version anyway. On to the second story, Who, What, Where, Ed. It begins with the Eds making breakfast, and thanks to some hilarious hijinks, Ed ends up costing them their eggs. So where do you get eggs? Chickens. So the trio decide to ask Rolf for one of his chickens. Rolf bargains to them that he'll give them an egg if they get him sawdust.
And the rest is a glorious collectathon.
Kevin says he'll get the Eds sawdust if they get him paint. Jimmy says that he'll get the Eds paint if they give him clams.
Jimmy, not sure if you really want clams.
They tend to latch onto you and kill you. Johnny says that he'll give them clams if they get him an anchor, and the Eds try to swindle the cankers out of their anchor.
So if you haven't seen the episode already, just go watch it, because this scene is pretty damn hilarious on its own.
After that goes as well as, well, any other time the Eds go to the Canker Sisters, they ask Johnny if they can trade something else, and apparently Plank wants a racket, which Sarah has. And Sarah says that she'll trade for a giant teddy bear. Jimmy will trade that if they get him plums. And once again, they're back at Rolf's. At first it seems useless, but Rolf gives them the plums once Ed gives Rolf his yo-yo.
Saved by the Ed.
And as all the deals are met, the Eds are rewarded with an egg, but Ed cracks it. To quote the ending line, "The chicken's gone bad, like my luck." The last story, Hot Buttered Ed, begins with the Eds camping out in Ed's backyard, doing things like shadow puppetry, fighting over chips, and overall being loud, annoying Jimmy. "Can you keep it down out there? Some of us are trying to sleep." "Shh! We're disturbing our neighbors, Eddy." "Oh, are we?" And Ed and Eddy proceed to armpit fart. Cut to the next morning where the Eds have... The Eds then run to the creek, but it seems that Kevin, being a dick as usual, has stolen their spot. Double D tries to compromise, but Eddy puts it as Kevin stole the better spot.
As a person who has seen this episode, I have no idea how Double D thought this was a good replacement spot.
There's rocks and garbage and butts everywhere.
Not to mention the lack of shade.
Double D hops on board with the idea of kicking Kevin out of his spot when he realizes that he forgot his sunscreen. So they put the plan into action. They'll work their way up to Kevin and kick him out, but first they gotta kick out Sarah and Jimmy from their spot. It almost works as Ed engages in a game of
Splish splash in a bath? I have. You have? Whoa! Splish splash, take a bath. Ed!
but Sarah comes back and kicks their asses into the creek. Look, it's an eclipse of the sun!
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a crater, it's Kim Kardashian's ass. Nah, instead it's just Johnny's head.
So Johnny's on top of a peak that Kevin is underneath, and the Eds decide to kick Johnny out of his spot so they can keep their eye on Kevin. As they climb up, Eddie comes up with an idea involving a trapeze.
Considering the fact that in this show people can just pull the most random of objects out from behind them, I think pulling out a trapeze and using it wouldn't have been too much of a stretch.
But Double D blows a whistle and it gets Johnny to jump off like he's in swim class or something. Ed jumped onto Johnny's sunscreen bottle with one foot, squirting a long flow of cream
sexual innuendo
over the edge. The sound of a babbling brook makes me want to babble. Was that Johnny's sunscreen? Double D felt sick. He needed that sunscreen. And just as everyone packs up to leave, the Eds notice Kevin leaving, but it's really too late since it's sunset, and just as one more example that sucks to be the Eds get sunburned.
Moral of the story, kids, life's a bitch and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, on to the next one, Book of Extreme Excuses.
It begins with a monologue from Eddy. It's not easy being young and broke, especially if you're like me, in need of jawbreakers with no way to get cash. So sometimes an Ed's gotta do what an Ed's gotta do. If you're going to succeed as a young maverick tycoon, you're going to have to live on the edge. And if you live on the edge, you're going to need to make at least a few excuses along the way. So I've taken the time out of my busy schedule to give you some advice. In this book, you'll find excuses for everything that might happen and tips of how to use them. But here's what I tell Ed and Double D to remember. No matter what happens, no matter what you do, if you're really focused, you will discover you have a perfectly good excuse for everything. Good luck and good excuse. Signed, Eddy. I'm not sure about this, Eddy. The rest of the book becomes an activity book where kids can write their way out of certain situations, whether it be through word association or writing a full paragraph of what you could do.
Oh god, I can just see a bunch of asshole uber-political types saying, "Now you see here, this book is trying to convince kids to be rebellious towards their parents. This is the worst thing since Grand Theft Auto." But honestly, both these books are pretty good.
Lots of Laughs is a really well-written adaptation of 3 memorable episodes, and Book of Extreme Excuses is a really fun way for kids to learn.